But ultimately, I've seen that face. I've seen teams go up against this Pacers team, the Cavs being one of them, and look exactly the same way the Thunder did last night.
It's so interesting because if you think back to some of what the Cavs did during the regular season, they went on these runs and everybody started calling them Cavalanches, right? Against lesser opponents, they just wilt. The Cavs went on some of those runs against Indy, and they were right there. They're like, all right, we're still here.
Yeah.
Less Miami couldn't withstand that.
No, moment you got a Cavalanche, it was over.
It was over, done, over with.
Blouses.
But Indiana's not fazed by that. They're just like, okay, we're going to make our own run. We're going to trust our system. We're going to trust our coach. We're going to trust our all-star point guard. And it's a special quality that most championship teams have. And I don't know if they're going to go on and win this series against OKC, but this NBA Finals is starting to feel a lot like 2011. Miami was the more talented team. They had the high-profile players. They were the talk of the NBA that year for a variety of reasons.
The most embarrassing LeBron Finals of his existence.
Because he was uncomfortable. Because he was uncomfortable in those situations that Dallas was comfortable in.
Yeah.
And I think there's a common denominator there, right? It's Rick Carlisle. Rick Carlisle is one of the best coaches in the NBA. And if you have a belief in your coach that he's going to come up with solutions and he's going to be a problem solver over and over and over again, and he instills confidence in everybody, whether it's Ben Mathurin, whether it's Thomas Bryant, whether it's Tony Bradley coming off the bench. I don't know how many wins Rick Carlisle is worth, but we've seen what he can do throughout the course of a playoff run.
Yeah.
And that's a huge advantage that Indy has. So it starts with him and it trickles throughout the roster. And there's just a level of mental toughness and a level of maturity that these other teams have not been able to get to, including the Cavs.
Well, what's impressive to me is that, and they have something that I thought I saw a lot of with the Cavs during the regular season, and then in the playoffs it kind of went away. But the idea that, yes, their stars are their stars. Halliburton's going to show up. Siakam's going to show up. They're going to do their part. But then, and listen, we can all respect Benedict Mathurin, but like Mathurin going for 27 is it's an equivalent of like when Ty Jerome would just have these games where he would go off, or one of these other guys would go off. TJ McConnell being the impact player that he was last night, the steals that he had, the stat line was incredible for him last night. But it's like the Cavs kept getting it from, obviously you have Donovan and the main stars, but then there were these other players in back of it, and they would pop up on any given night throughout the regular season. They would just, one of them, or even sometimes two of them would just show up, and you'd be like, oh, I guess that's name players 6 through 10's game. And I feel like the Pacers have that in spades throughout the entire postseason.
Remember what we talked about the other day, Jonathan? We were talking about there are 82 game players and there are 16 game players.
Yeah.
It feels like to me that Indiana has an entire roster of 16 game players. It's outrageous.
Yeah.
Everybody that they call on, and it doesn't mean every single game. Mathurin doesn't do this every single game, right?
And that's the difference, though. There are games, though, where he steps up and he's there, and then there are other games where it's like, all right, I guess it's Obi Toppin's turn.
That's exactly right. So Rick will push that button. Okay, Mathurin doesn't have it. Let's go to the next guy, and that guy's ready. That guy doesn't have it the following game. Okay, let's go to the next guy. They just have so many different options that they can go to. They don't need every single one every single night, but they have different guys throughout the course of their roster and throughout the course of the season that they've put in these situations so that they're ready for this moment. And they've been together and they've done this playoff run together. They've had success in the playoffs together. They've had failures in the playoff together, and it just makes them better. It makes them more ready for this moment. And playoff basketball is different. Everybody understands playoff basketball is different. It takes a different kind of mentality, different kind of intensity, different kind of focus, approach. And they've learned all of that together over the last couple of years, and you're seeing it come together. And in the fourth quarter, Oklahoma City looked like a team that just had not been through those things, that hadn't been there before.
And they were also way too shocked with the full court press. Like, there are certain things that just caught them way off guard for some reason.
Indy's tough to play against, man.
Well, Indy looked like
going against that for 48 minutes.
The Thunder are supposed to be obviously one of the best defensive teams we've seen in 10 years. But it looked like, if you would have told me, if I never saw either team play before yesterday, I would have been like, oh, the Pacers, that's the defensive team. That's the one you're talking about.
That's the thing. I mean, I don't think enough people give Indy credit for the kind of defensive team that they can be, not on a night in, night out basis.
I've never seen the Thunder so gassed by the fourth quarter.
Yes, because it wears on you, because Andrew Nemhard wears on you over the course of 48. Now you take 48 and you turn it into a 7-game series and think about how worn down and exhausted you are by the end of that series.
Would the Cavs beat both teams if healthy? I'm watching the Pacers last night, Chris, and there's no way the Cavs beat them if healthy.
Oh, I don't think so either. Look, going into the series, I thought it was going to be a close series between the two teams. I picked the Cavs to win in 6. I was thinking Cavs in 7.
I remember we talked to you before that series got underway, and in just a sea of Cavs in 6, Cavs in 7, Cavs in 5, you're like, this is the one team the Cavs do not want to play.
Yeah.
Okay, there was something that you'd seen with this team that struck a little bit of fear when not many people had seen it.
It's really interesting, too, because a lot of us reporters talk amongst each other when we get into there for practice or shoot around or stuff. And I was in a heavy conversation with Danny Cunningham, actually, who covers the Cavs as well. And we were going back and forth on who the second best player in the series is, how long it was going to go. And I said, I don't know, Danny, like this thing has 7 written all over it. He was like, there's no way Indiana takes the Cavs to 7.
Danny also last night said Oklahoma City in 5. They were winning the next 4. So just want to make that abundantly clear.
So I just don't know that enough people gave Indiana the respect that it earned going into the series.
Vegas still hasn't, by the way. I want to just point that out. Like Vegas, even during the series with the Cavs, where the Cavs were favored in every game, the Knicks were favored in every one of their games, and even up until, do you know the line for game 4? The
7.5,
6 points.
Okay.
Yeah. Thunder are favored by 6 points. Like they still are not buying into everything that the Pacers are giving off. But go ahead.
I think it was your partner, Nick Wilson, who was saying that we were trying to sell a boxing match or something like that.
Sell the fight. Exactly right.
And I just don't think enough people gave Indy the kind of credit that they deserved. You know, since January, they've been one of the best teams in the entire NBA. This isn't new. So I felt like it was a competitive series going in, but I thought the Cavs were going to win because I thought they were the more talented team. I thought they had the best player, and I wasn't sure that Indiana's defense could get to the level that we've seen consistently throughout the course of these playoffs, especially against the Cavs offense that was one of the best in NBA history. But after seeing that series play out and seeing some of the matchup problems that Indy created for the Cavs, and seeing some of the lack of readiness from the Cavs' most important players compared to Indy's most important players, I don't know how you could watch that series and say injuries would have made the difference between winning that series and losing it. If you want to say making it more competitive, sure, totally get that. But winning that, beating Indy 4 times in 7 tries, no. I don't think the Cavs fully healthy would have beaten this Indiana team 4 times in 7 tries.
But I also think the thing going against Indiana right now is that, yes, they have a lot of good players that we know, but even like Halliburton was voted as overrated by his own peers. Siakam has never been given the due credit that I feel like Siakam has earned. And even a guy like Benedict Mathurin, who was obviously exceptional last night, next couple years, Mathurin's going to be a household name. He's that type of player.
Yes.
He's the type of guy that's only going to get better and better and has already showcased himself to be really, really good in the early parts of his career. And I just think we're going to look back on this Pacers team and we're going to think to ourselves, of course they won the title. Look how loaded this roster was. But it just kind of blindsided everyone and we didn't see it for what it was to begin with.
So if you take a step back and you try and take the emotion out of it, right? Pascal Siakam, not only was he a champion, he was the number 2 option on a championship team.
Yeah.
He's more ready for this than Evan Mobley is.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about the second best player in the series behind Donovan Mitchell, you have to talk about Siakam. You have to talk about Tyrese Halliburton before you talk about anybody related to the Cavs, even when fully healthy. Because they've done it to a level that these guys have not shown.
I feel like now he's calling out Nick while not calling out Nick. Does that feel like that to you? You're not aware of Nick's take. I want you to. I want you to become aware of it. Well, he told it to you on the air at one point. It was a very long time ago, so I don't expect you to have the memory attached to all of Nick's takes.
But it wasn't just Nick. It was the general conversation of if you get on a schoolyard and you start picking these guys.
I'm with you. That was part of the convo though, and Nick has already owned up to this. He's repented for this one. He did like 7 Hail Marys and Our Fathers. He's all good. I gave him the cross sign and everything. Like, we're cool. But at the time, we got in this knock him out, drag him out fight because he wanted to say that Darius Garland would go 3rd in that race, 1, 2, 3. And it was all Cavs players, 1, 2, 3. And he was ahead of Tyrese Halliburton. And I said, you're bananas. So there's no way Tyrese Halliburton's fourth on this list. And we can debate talking about number two. But it was one of those things that he didn't want to do. But that's I think vocally, and we do this vocally, we have a different viewpoint of these Cavs teams and these Cavs players than everybody else. And the Pacers, they've earned a lot of the credit that they're now getting.
I almost put Halliburton fifth on my MVP ballot, and everybody was yelling at me for it. But he is one of the most impactful players in the NBA. And I think that is something that Cavs fans need to take away from these playoffs. There is a difference between talent and impact. There is a difference between production and impact. Evan Mobley is never going to be defined by production, but he is an impactful player. We can all admit that because what he does at both ends of the floor, what he does on a possession-to-possession basis, especially on the defensive end. Right?
Yeah.
But we have to have an understanding of when it comes to Darius Garland, when it comes to Jarrett Allen, their level of impact in a playoff environment is not going to be what I think everybody in this town wants it to be. Darius is not going to impact games the way that Tyrese Halliburton does. Right. He's not going to dictate terms for a defense the way that Tyrese Halliburton does. He's not going to orchestrate offense the way that Tyrese Halliburton does. And like I said, you can't speed up Evan Mobley's clock. Just because he's really, really talented, just because he's second team All-NBA and a first-time All-Star, you can't make him ready for playoff basketball because you want it to match the window of Donovan Mitchell or the timeline of Donovan Mitchell. He's just not ready to be what Pascal Siakam is for the Indiana Pacers right now. Just like Chet Holmgren is not ready right now. He might be in 3 to 5 years, and maybe Oklahoma City has enough around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that makes it so the readiness of Chet Holmgren is not going to prevent them from winning a championship. Maybe, but the Cavs need Evan Mobley and Darius Garland to be more ready for playoff basketball and be more mature from a basketball standpoint than what they currently are. And until they get to that point, Kenny Atkinson was talking about it throughout the course of the year. Kobe Altman talked about it. Kenny Atkinson point blank said, we need Darius to be 28, not 25.
Yeah, he did.
He did.
He did. Yeah.
And he was talking about the mental side of the game. He was talking about basketball maturity. And Darius isn't there yet. And Evan Mobley's not there yet. And you can't speed up that clock.
Yeah, there's no way to microwave that process. Like I keep trying to think of like what different things they could do to get him to that spot quicker. Because I do think part of the bet, if they run it back, is that Evan Mobley will have some sort of big drastic leap from one year to the next. But you're right though. There's even outside of it, just his physical part. If it gets better and better, the mental side of it, it's still it's going to be lacking because he's not 28.
And here's the variable that nobody can predict, and this is part of the evaluation for the front office this offseason. Just how much going through all of these playoff failures and successes, how much is that going to make Evan more ready? How much better is that going to make Evan for playoff level basketball? Same thing when it comes to Darius. Same thing when it comes to Jarrett Allen. And I don't know how you predict that. Maybe going through all of this, maybe losing to Indiana in the fashion that the Cavs did, maybe that's going to make these guys better. Maybe losing 2 years ago against the New York Knicks, maybe losing last year in the conference semifinals to Boston. All of these lessons that they gained throughout the course of this journey together, it's going to make them better equipped for playoff basketball. Maybe.
And it might with Evan. The problem I have only with that conversation is the idea that Darius Garland fans would just come back and they'd be like, well, mentally he's fine and he's there. And that's not the part that's going to help him. He was injured the past 2 years. And they'll just try to use that as the excuse. And I think that's where we fall short in the Darius Garland conversation because we're not acknowledging the idea that even if he's healthy, he still hasn't gotten to a spot that they need him to be.
So many people are focused on Darius's talent, and that is undeniable. Right? The spellbinding passes, the masterful dribble, the stop-start, the just dynamic offensive player that he is. But there's another end of the floor that matters.
Yeah.
especially when you get into a 7-game series and you start targeting certain weaknesses.
When you saw it last night, even with SGA, like what Indiana was able to do defensively on him, and then how it just impacted everyone else around that Thunder team.
Yeah.
Like the reason why I said I thought the Pacers looked like a much better defensive team last night than the Thunder. Like this stuff matters for these big time games.
And it doesn't matter what Indy does throughout the course of the regular season and what their regular season rating is on defense. It's middle of the pack, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's not terrible. It's not Washington Wizards or Charlotte Hornets, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is a 7-game series against a particular opponent. And when they have dudes like Andrew Nemhard and Aaron Nesmith and some of these, Ben Shepherd even, and TJ McConnell, some of these rugged defenders that can get in you and pressure you full court and take you out of your rhythm offensively, that's all that matters. And in a matchup, in a 7-game series matchup, those dudes are going to be tough to play against for years to come, provided they stay together, because they have multiple feisty on-ball defenders that can guard the likes of Darius Garland, that can guard the likes of Donovan Mitchell. And nobody is shutting down Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Nobody's shutting down Donovan Mitchell. But can you make it difficult? Yeah. Can you throw different bodies at that guy and wear him down over the course of a series? That's what they're doing.
That's what they're doing. And that's why in the fourth quarter, they missed 9 out of their last 10, the Thunder did. Like in the most important part of the game, they went blank based off of what Indiana was able to offer up defensively.